be talking about breakfast. I love breakfast, especially if it's breakfast for dinner or if I already have it prepared beforehand. So today we're going to be making 3 recipes that you can make with your kids in the kitchen using farmers market ingredients and that you can prep ahead of time. We're going to be making egg muffins, we're going to be making some overnight oats, and we're going to be making an apple sausage skillet recipe. So if you're ready, let's get started. Okay, we're going to be making some hash browns. Now, this you can use for many different recipes. You can either make little potato pancakes with it, or you can make it and add it to the skillet sausage apple dish that we'll be making later, or you can make it ahead and also have it in the egg cups. So, first thing, potatoes sometimes get a bad rep because they are high in carbs, but potatoes, a lot of times if you aren't adding all of the extra butter and the sour cream or frying them and having french fries, they can be pretty healthy for you, especially if you leave the skin on. Potatoes have both vitamin C and iron, and vitamin C helps your body absorb the iron. So for kids and women, that can be especially helpful. Now, one of the ways that I like to be able to keep the skin on is to be able to grate the potato, and then you can't really taste the skin or have that texture. So we're just going to grate the potato here. And then the other thing you're going to want to do after you grate the potato, I already grated a bunch, is to squeeze out the excess water. So once you can see that you can squeeze it out, that's going to help the hash browns from becoming too gummy. The other thing you can do is pat dry with a paper towel. So there you go. So now that we have some grated potatoes, we are going to go ahead and use some oil. You want to use an oil that has a high burn point. So if you do want to have like a little bit of butter, or if you were cooking up some bacon or sausage, you can use a little bit of that oil, a little bit of peanut oil or canola oil, something like that. Not a lot, you don't need a ton of it. And then once this gets going, you're going to add a little bit of onions. Of course, if you don't like onions, you can always skip this step. So let the oil heat up. I already added a little bit in. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add some onion. And we're just going to cook this until it is a translucent color. Okay, once the onions have softened and have become kind of see-through, you're going to want to add your potatoes. Kind of just coat the bottom of the pan. And then I usually let it sit on one side for a while, so that way it starts to kind of brown up. You can then stir it around and flip it over and let it brown on the other side. So we'll be back in a few moments after this is cooked up. Okay, you can season this with whatever seasonings you like. Today I'm just going to add just a tidbit of pepper because I'm actually going to be using this in one of our egg muffin recipes. Okay, we're going to start off by making a skillet fry. Now, I love this recipe because there is no recipe. Literally today what I did was I looked at what food was at the farmer's market and I grabbed vegetables. So there was some kale, they had some potatoes, there was an apple, of course there's still some yellow squash, got some parsley, and some onions. And then I went into my freezer and found that I had some sausage that I had already cooked up. Now you can either cook up the sausage now, you can leave the sausage out, whatever you feel like. whatever makes it easiest for you. A chicken sausage is really good with this as well. So again, if you don't eat pork, you can always change it out that way. If you want to still add a little bit of protein and not have an animal source, you can have some tofu in it as well. So really, this recipe is whatever you want to make it. So I'm going to start off with, again, adding a little bit of an oil. Today I'm just going to do a little bit of little bit of butter, and then I'm going to start sautéing up the onions. Now I want to have the onions so that they soften a little bit and become slightly clear. I'm then going to add the potatoes, and I'm going to let those cook mostly the way through. The potatoes is what's going to take the longest. Once those are kind of cooked, then I'm going to add today the squash and the apples and the sausage and the kale. Now the sausage, like I said, for me is already cooked. If it's not already cooked, I would say go ahead and cook that first, and then you can use a little bit of the oil from the sausage to go ahead and start cooking the onions. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we'll be right back. This is starting to look and smell delicious. So while it finishes cooking up a little bit here, I want to mention that if you use a squash in here, today I'm using a yellow squash, and because it's becoming a little later in the season for squash, this is a little bit more tough, which is why I wanted to add it in earlier. If you were going to use a zucchini, or if it's pretty soft, you're going to want to add it in later so that it doesn't become extremely mushy. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add the sausage. And while the sausage is already cooked, because we're reheating it, we want to make sure that the sausage gets back up to an internal temperature of 165. So we'll stir this in, and those flavors are going to start to meld together, and that apple is going to give it a little bit of sweetness. It's going to be so good. Also just going to add a little bit of garlic. I don't tend to like to add the garlic too early in the process because it can burn. And then at the very end, I'm going to add the kale, and then I'll add the tomatoes. Now, as I mentioned in an earlier episode, the tomatoes will make it a little bit juicier, and you'll also want to make sure you add the tomatoes in at the very end, because once you add the tomatoes, the acidic from the tomatoes is going to stop the cooking process of the other food. It'll still heat up, but it won't meld together quite as well. So we'll continue cooking, and I'll be right back. All right, let's take a look. I'm not gonna lie, the house is smelling really good right now. So now I'm gonna add some kale, and don't worry, the kale's gonna cook down a lot. If you don't want to use kale, spinach, other greens, whatever, again, you want to add. And then once this cooks down and becomes a bit more wilted, we'll add the tomatoes, and then our skillet dish will be done. All right, now take a look at this picture here, and you'll be able to see just how bright and colorful and green that kale is. This is about the time now that we can go ahead and add the tomatoes. We'll just let this heat up a little bit, and then this dish is ready to serve now, or you can put it in the fridge and have it later. Okay, egg muffins. These are awesome because, again, you can use whatever ingredients that you find at the farmer's market, whatever ingredients that your family loves. You can add extra protein to them, you can not add meat to it, you can add different cheeses, you can not add cheese. Really, the sky's the limit when it comes to these. The other great thing about egg muffins is that they last a while in the fridge, so you can take it if you're on the go. Again, though, don't ever have kids eat while they're moving, but you can have it, pack a lunch for them really easily. You can freeze them and have a quick breakfast already made for you. So what I normally do is I crack a bunch of eggs into a Pyrex measuring cup. That's the word I was looking for. You do not need to use a measuring cup, but I find that if you do have a large enough measuring cup, it does make pouring a little bit easier. If you don't have that, you can also use a ladle, whatever you prefer. Today, I'm just using the same cheese for all of them, but you know, changing up the cheese, you can use a mozzarella cheese. If you really want to get fancy, you could use a goat cheese, you know, cheddar cheese, whatever you prefer. I'm going to be making 3 different kinds today. I'm going to do a kale, green onion, sausage, and parsley. So this is a nice way to use up some fresh herbs. The second one, I'm going to do some spinach, some tomatoes, and some basil. Now, a mozzarella cheese in this one would be really, really great. If you had some homemade pesto or any pesto, you could dab that on the top when you serve it. So that's something. Now, the last one, I'm going to do some broccoli, some potatoes, and some chives. This is how chives look like. And some onions. Again, you can do whatever ingredients you want. Now the broccoli, today I'm using it raw, and it will be a little bit more crunchy when it's after you bake it. Or if you want to steam it beforehand, another great way to make these egg muffins is to use leftovers from the night before. So say you have some chicken and broccoli the night before, you could cut up some of the chicken, use some of the broccoli, add that into an egg muffin. Whatever, again, sky's the limits. So I'm going to use it raw today. Another reason why I like to use it raw is if I do cook it or freeze it and save it for later, then it cooks a bit more when you reheat it up. So let's get started. This is where you get the kids involved. So this week when you go to the farmer's market, make sure you take a look at what ingredients they have there and what you might be able to put together. All right, so I added just a little bit of kale, which I just chopped up So we'll put that in here. I'm going to add some green pepper, which I finely diced. And I'm going to add some diced sausage. Now this is already pre-cooked, so you can cook it beforehand. You can do chicken sausage, you could do kibasi, you could do bacon if you wanted to do bacon. Again, you could do no meats. Alright, so that's one there. I am going to add just a little bit of parsley, but again, the parsley on the very end, nice and fresh, will really brighten the flavor up too. Alright, second one, I'm going to add some spinach. Now this spinach I just diced up. It does cook down, so we'll put that in here. And then these are some cherry tomatoes that we cut in half. And then some basil. This basil I also diced. There you go. Now, the last one here, be sure your eggs don't roll off the table. Okay, the last one I'm just going to put a little bit of broccoli, and this I just finely diced up into bite-sized pieces. Now for this last one, I'm actually going to do a little something different. So earlier today we made some hash browns. Now there's 2 different ways that you can use this in the egg muffins. One, you can first put it in the bottom and almost make like a crust. And just pat it around here. And then you could bake it. You would do this before you put all of the other ingredients in. Bake it, and then that will add a little bit of a crust, make it a little bit extra crispy, that then after you would add all of the rest of your ingredients into. So today though, we're not going to do that. I'm just going to put some potatoes in the bottom. So half of these I'm going to do the shredded potatoes that we made earlier, and the other half I'm going to do some of the diced potatoes that we made earlier with the skillet sausage apple dish. So just showing you lots of options. Again, a great way to use up leftovers that you have. I'm gonna add some chives. And for this one, I am gonna add just a little bit of onion. Forgot to add broccoli in the last one, so we'll do that. Okay, now come take a look at how this looks before I put all of the eggs in. Okay, I'm now going to fill these up with the eggs. And when you fill them, don't fill them all the way to the top, because when it bakes, they're going to poof up a little bit. So I fill it about 2/3 of the way full. I'll show you a picture here on how it looks after I get all the eggs in here. Okay, so I poured the eggs in. Now some of them I got a little too full, some of them not quite as much. That's okay, it's not the end of the world. Now, for the last ingredient, I'm going to top this with some cheese. For all of them here, you could mix the cheese into the egg mixture if you really want to do that. I like to top it. Okay, now that the cheese has been added, we are going to pop this in a preheated 375 degree oven. We're going to cook it anywhere between 15 minutes to 25 minutes, just depending until when the eggs are all set. Always, you can take the temperature. You want these to be cooked up to 160 degrees. So I'm going to pop this in the oven and I'll be right back. All right, these egg muffins have been in for about 25 minutes and they look delicious. You can definitely see where some got a little bit more filled than others, but they're all okay. Now what I do is I just take a little knife and go around the edges to help pop them out upside down. Here we go. These are still pretty steaming, so you'll want to let them cool a little bit. But I personally can't wait. Okay, so this one's the broccoli, cheese, and potatoes. This is the spinach and tomato, and this one's the kale and sausage one. And we've made some fresh pesto that you can also top on. Add that. You can add some fresh chives right on top of here, or some fresh parsley right on top of here, and you have a yummy dessert, snack, on the go meal for lunch, some dinner, you know, breakfast for dinner.
Hi, I'm Allie and I am a dietitian, and I'm going to show you how to make overnight oats. So this is another great recipe for the kids to kind of get involved in, because they can pick and choose what toppings they want. So you don't have to follow this recipe exactly. You know, the only important thing is for your oats and your milk, you want equal parts. But you can make a banana blueberry, a banana peanut butter, all different kinds. Today we're going to make an apple pie, apple cinnamon kind of overnight oats. And overnight oats, you don't have to necessarily do them ahead of time and let them sit overnight in the fridge. You can either do 2 hours or 8 hours. So 8 hours would be for today's recipe, at least, because of the apples. So we're going to use raw apples. You could do either raw or cooked apples. So it just depends on your preference, if you like a little bit of crunch in your oatmeal, or if you like the same consistency, same textures, then you would want to probably cook them ahead of time. And today, so we have our oats. It's about 1/2 cup. So we're using just regular rolled oats. Steel cut oats you probably don't want to use, just because they do take a little bit longer to break down from the milk. Instant oats would get too mushy because they're instant. And milk, we have 1/2 cup, so equal parts to our oats. And milk, you can do either a milk substitute like Lactaid, or you could do soy milk as well. We have a little bit of maple syrup just to kind of give it a little bit of sweetness. You could also use other sweeteners like honey. And then we have our apples, of course. And apples are great right now because they're just getting in season. So you should start seeing them at the farmers markets as well. So, and then of course we have our seasonings as well. So we have some nuts. Just be careful because they are a choking hazard for kiddos. And then we have a little bit of brown sugar. We have our cinnamon, nutmeg, and allspice, just to give it some flavors. And you can play around with this if you not a big fan of cinnamon. You can use a little bit of less, or you don't have to use it at all. So we'll be adding that at the end. So you want to always start with your oats and just put it in any kind of jar. It doesn't have to be a mason jar. And then we'll add our milk. That way the oats can kind of sit in the milk and soften up. And we'll do our apples so they can sit in the milk as well. And we'll do a little bit of splash of our maple syrup. And then we'll add all of our toppings and our seasonings. And like I said, you can kind of individualize this, so each kiddo can have their own little jar and kind of pick and choose what toppings they want to put in. And they're more likely to eat it if they feel like they made it. And then all that's left is to put the lid on or cover it. And then you can give it a good shake, and this is a good one for the kids to kind of do as well. And then all that's left is to put this in the fridge and wait at least 8 hours before you eat it. Or if you want it a little bit softer, you'll wait overnight. So then you have a nice quick grab and go breakfast in the morning. So this one got made last night, so this is actually ready to go. And this looks a little bit more full because we did double the recipe since it was a little bit wider of a jar. So you can see that the oats kind of softened up, and now you have a nice yummy breakfast in the morning. So enjoy!
I do want to say, when potatoes that I sort of did a little cut first, still sort of worked.